Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation. My name's Meg Baskerville. I work for Environment Climate Change Canada on the Offsets and Emissions Trading Section team, which is part of the Carbon Markets Bureau. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the federal offset system as well as some of our federal offset protocols. Okay, so for a brief overview of the presentation today, first I'm going to talk about Canada's GHG offset credit system. Then I want to go over some of the main considerations for implementing an offset project. So what are the main things that you want to think about before undertaking one? And then I want to move in to talk about some of our improved forest management federal offset protocols. And then finally, I have a slide on some additional resources if you want to learn more about the federal offset system or just about carbon markets in general. So first, the federal offset system. So Canada's GHG offset credit system provides an incentive for activities that reduce GHGs, and the GHG reductions need to go beyond business as usual. So the additional, I think that's a concept we've heard at this conference already, and they also need to go beyond legal requirements. Further, the GHG reductions cannot already be covered by carbon pollution pricing measures. So that could be the federal output-based pricing system, the clean fuel regulations, something like that. It has many benefits, so it provides new opportunities to earn revenues. This is particularly for sectors that are outside of existing carbon pricing policies, so agriculture, forestry, and waste are the main ones. It also drives private sector investment into GHG-reducing activities. So the credits themselves can be sold to facilities regulated under the federal pricing system. This is a compliance offset system, so it was designed initially for a compliance mechanism under the federal output-based pricing system. So that's the pricing system on industrial emitters, but there are no restrictions on who can purchase offset credits. So anybody can buy them for voluntary purposes, such as corporate net zero requirements. Any of us here could also buy offset credits to offset our emissions, maybe to get here today. So things like that. The sale of the federal offset credits occurs outside the system. So the federal government does not facilitate the sale of offset credits. That's negotiated between buyers and sellers. So there's lots of words on this slide. So I just want to highlight the federal offset protocols that we have that are considered nature-based solutions. So we have many protocols that are currently published and many others that are under development. But right now published that, as a current opportunity that's a nature-based solution is the improved forest management on private land protocol. It's applicable everywhere but in BC, and the only reason why it's not applicable in BC is because our system is designed to be complementary, so we do not overlap with existing provincial or territorial offset systems if they have a protocol for the same project type. Another nature-based solution that we should be publishing soon is reducing enteric methane emissions for beef cattle. So different feeding strategies to reduce GHG emissions there. And then under development as well is an enhanced soil organic carbon protocol. So that focuses on kind of regenerative agricultural practices on croplands. And then we also have improved forest management on public land, which I will hopefully have time to speak to a little bit at the end. So the key elements of our federal offset system, it kind of has three main parts. The first is the regulations. So it's a compliance system. It is operationalized by regulations. These kind of set the base rules that are applicable to all projects in the system. We also have federal offset protocols. So these are specific to a given project type, such as improved forest management. And it sets out kind of general eligibility requirements specific to the project type, as well as how to quantify your GHG reductions. And then finally, there's the tracking system, which we colloquially call CATS. It is where you register your offset project. It also tracks the issuance and sales of credits. So once you kind of have your system or have your account and you have your credits, it will track when they move to someone else's account. There's also various information about the projects available there. So project reports, things like that. So what are the main considerations for implementing a project? And this is kind of general to any system. This is not specific to just the federal offset system. First and foremost, when you choose a system, you need to understand the rules of that system. So as I mentioned, we have protocols, we have regulations. Most systems will have standards, protocols that you need to understand, and you need to make sure your project's going to be feasible in that system. Next is you need to be aware of the project time commitment. So it can be pretty short or it can be quite long depending on the project type. So it can range from 10 to 125 years. So we have 125-year commitments in our system. You have 25-year crediting periods for forestry plus 100 years for permanence. So it can be a long time, but that's important for the integrity of the system. You also may need to build up some capacity and resources. You maybe need some capacity building. You may need to find some outside funding sources. There's also a lot of risks and uncertainty with offset projects. So I've mentioned permanence already. That can be a big risk of offset projects. So you just need to understand for your project type, what are the risks and uncertainties that are applicable to you. There are many co-benefits of undertaking offset projects, so you may want to design your project in order to achieve multiple objectives. And you also may want to build relationships with trusted partners. This might actually be required by some protocols to get free prior informed consent or do some community relationship building, or you may want to partner with a project developer. We also always encourage people to learn from the experience of others. So reach out to other people who have done offset projects, try and find the lessons learned there. And then finally, you're going to need to have a buyer of credits. So someone needs to buy them. The best possible scenario is having some sort of pre-purchase agreement. So actually getting a buyer in advance of actually getting issued your credits. So you have someone who's going to buy those credits for you. So there's many benefits of offset projects. I think I've touched on a few of them already, and they're very interconnected benefits. So there's obviously going to be economic benefits. You're generating this credit, which can be sold. That's a new revenue stream. It can create conservation economy. There may be employment opportunities related to the offset project. It also has many social benefits. So this can reinforce land stewardship. There's conservation of ecological systems, any other values from the system. And then there's obviously environmental benefits. So there's climate change mitigation being the obvious one. But as I mentioned, there can be co-benefits for soil, water quality, wildlife habitat, things like that. So our federal offset protocols for improved forest management. So as I noted on a previous slide, there are two. But before I jump into any specifics, I just want to briefly go over what is improved forest management. It's kind of this catch-all term. I think it's not very clear what we always mean when we're talking about IFM. So I have a very crude clip art depiction here. So on the top, you can kind of see the progression of a forest over time. This is the baseline scenario. It's the business as usual management scenario. It's what would have happened to the project had you not, or what would have happened to the project site had you not done the project. So it's whatever the typical management would have been. So in this picture, I'd shown here some fairly aggressive harvesting. In the project scenario, this is the new activities you're undertaking. It's what you're doing to go beyond these baseline activities. So you're trying to increase growth. You're trying to maybe decrease harvest, some sort of new activity. And the key here is that it needs to outcompete the baseline from a carbon perspective. So there's usually no exclusive list of project activities. It's just whatever you implement, it needs to generate more GHG reductions than the baseline. So I kind of tried to show that you can kind of see the difference between the baseline and the project. That increased carbon on site, that increased biomass, that's what you're going to get credits for. So for our IFM protocol on private land, we have several key elements of this protocol. Additionality and baselines is going to be one of the most important when it comes to IFM, really all project types, but it's really something that's scrutinized in IFM protocols. So this is going to be establishing what those baseline activities are. What is that business as usual management scenario? We also have environmental safeguards. So these ensure no net harm to the environment as a result of the project activities. So you cannot make the environmental conditions of the project site worse compared to the baseline. The forest carbon inventory is really important to note. It can be a significant cost associated with IFM projects, but that's how you measure the carbon. So it's really important that you develop a robust methodology in order to quantify the biomass on site and therefore know how much carbon is increasing. Next is leakage. So I'm not sure if that's maybe a concept that's come up yet in this conference, but it essentially accounts for the shift in GHG emissions from the project site to somewhere outside the project site. So in IFM, this comes from forest product leakage. So I decrease my harvest at my project site, but there's still demand for wood products in the market. So someone else somewhere else increased their harvest to make up for my decrease. This is fundamentally what leakage is, and we need to account for it in the protocol to make sure GHG reductions are real. Finally, permanence is so important for IFM. You know, as we've been talking about a lot at this conference, there's wildfires, there's other natural disturbances that can occur within the project site. So we have a 100-year permanence policy, must maintain the GHG reductions for 100 years after they occur. So in terms of improved forest management on public land, I don't have too much to share at this point. We're very early in the development stage. It will have a very similar scope to IFM on private land, so improving carbon stocks in managed forest lands. But it will totally cover entirely new land tenure. So we're looking at provincial crown land and public land in the territories. We have numerous engagement processes going on right now in order to have all the right folks at the table while we develop this protocol. And I just want to highlight the excluded land tenures. So there's all the land tenures that are covered by private land. So this would be fee simple ownership, as well as where Indigenous peoples have exclusive use and occupation. This would include First Nation reserves. And then excluded land tenures are anything else that's federal crown land, so basically national parks and military bases. So in terms of additional resources, these are hyperlinks, so I'm hoping you guys have access to this deck later so that you can go through these. We have a GHG offsets toolkit available. It is not specific to the federal system. It's for carbon markets in general. It's available in English and French, as well as 5 Indigenous languages. And there's various different fact sheets on different parts of carbon markets. We also have the regulations, which is a long, boring read. But if you're interested in the system, I do encourage you to read them. But we do have an overview of the regulations if you just want to have a general understanding of the rules. Finally, I've also linked to the Improved Forest Management on Private Land protocol. We also have an overview of that document as well if you don't want to read all 96 pages of it. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you so much for coming and for listening. And if anybody has any questions, I can give you my email, but this is also our generic inbox for anything related to the offset system.